I stumbled on the family tree hanging in the study. My name, my birth date, every trace of me gone. My heart slammed against my chest. What the hell just happened to me? I stood frozen in my father's study, staring at the elaborate family tree that hung on the wall in a gilded frame. 'Twas new. I'd never seen it before. The branches stretched back generations, carefully labeled with names and dates. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, my father. His first wife, my mother, who died when I was 8. And then his second wife, Vivian. Her children from her previous marriage were there. 2 names I recognized. Stepchildren who joined our family 5 years ago. But my name, nowhere. I traced the line from my father's name. It went directly to Vivian, then to her children. As if I'd never existed. As if 24 years of my life had been erased with careful calligraphy. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, photographing the family tree from multiple angles. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I am Clara Whitman, and this is the story of how my stepmother tried to erase me, and how I uncovered the truth she thought was buried forever. I sank into the old leather armchair, trembling. How could someone deliberately rewrite history to erase me? The betrayal burned deeper than anger. It was humiliation. Yet I didn't shout. I sat in silent fury, letting it simmer. The study was quiet. My father was at work. Vivian was somewhere in the house, probably pleased with her handiwork. I looked around the room. This had been my sanctuary as a child, where my father read me stories, where I'd done homework while he worked at his desk, where I'd cried after my mother died and he'd held me, promising everything would be okay. Now it felt contaminated. The family tree wasn't the only new addition. I noticed other changes. Photos on the shelves had been rearranged. Some were missing entirely. The ones that showed me as a child, me with my mother, me celebrating birthdays and holidays. In their place were photos of Vivian's children. Vivian with my father. The new family that apparently didn't include me. I stood slowly, examining each shelf. Every trace of my childhood had been systematically removed or hidden. My graduation photo. The picture of me and my father at my college acceptance celebration. Replaced with a photo of Vivian's daughter at her high school graduation. 24 years of my life, carefully erased. While pretending to tidy the attic, I discovered old letters and school photos she hadn't touched. Tiny breadcrumbs of the real story. My pulse raced. I had proof she was manipulating our family's history. The attic was dusty, filled with boxes that hadn't been opened in years. Vivian rarely came up here. Too dirty for her tastes. I pulled down box after box, searching for evidence of my existence. In the 3rd box I found them. Letters my mother had written to my father before I was born. Love letters filled with hope for their future, for the family they'd build together. In another box, school photos. Me at age 6 missing my front teeth. Me at age 10 with braces. Me at age 15, awkward and hopeful. Report cards showing my academic achievements. Art projects I'd made. Birthday cards from relatives who remembered me, even if my stepmother wanted everyone to forget. I sat on the dusty floor, surrounded by proof of my existence. Vivian had redecorated the house, rearranged the photos, even commissioned that family tree. But she couldn't access the attic. My father had always kept it locked, storing memories too precious to discard. She'd erased me from the visible parts of the house. But the truth was still here, waiting to be uncovered. I began digging into old records at home, birth certificates, journals, and forgotten documents. Each piece restored fragments of the truth, revealing her pattern of erasure. In my father's desk, while he was at work and Vivian was out, I found the filing cabinet where he kept important documents. My birth certificate was still there, filed under my mother's maiden name. Proof I existed, dated and official. I found my parents' marriage certificate, photos from their wedding, a hospital bracelet from when I was born, with my mother's name and mine printed in faded ink. I photographed everything. In a journal my mother had kept, I found entries about her pregnancy, about my birth, about my first words and first steps. Her handwriting was careful, loving, documenting every moment of my early childhood. My father had saved everything. That meant he knew. He knew I'd been erased from the family narrative Vivian was constructing. The question was, did he approve, or was he simply too weak to stop her? I found more evidence in the guest room closet. Photo albums Vivian had hidden but not destroyed. Pictures of me throughout my childhood. Family vacations. Christmas mornings. Birthday parties. All the memories she'd tried to erase were still here, just hidden. I approached my father cautiously. His confusion and eventual disbelief at her actions only intensified my determination. I couldn't rely on him completely, but he became part of the backdrop of my strategy. "Dad, can we talk?" He looked up from his dinner, fork paused mid-air. Vivian was at her book club. We were alone. "Of course, Clara. What's on your mind? Have you seen the new family tree in your study?" He set down his fork. "Vivian had that commissioned. It's quite beautiful, isn't it?" "Dad, I'm not on it." Silence. "What do you mean? My name isn't there. It goes from you to Vivian to her children. Like I don't exist." He frowned. "That can't be right. There must be a mistake." "It's not a mistake. Come see." We walked to the study together. He stood in front of the family tree, studying it carefully. I watched his face change. Confusion. Realization. Something that might have been shame. I didn't look at it closely when she hung it up. I assumed. You assumed I'd be included in our own family history. "Clara, I'll talk to her. This is clearly an error." An error. Not a calculated insult. Not a deliberate erasure. Just an error. I realized then that I couldn't depend on him to fix this. In the solitude of my room, I let myself feel the betrayal fully. Tears, trembling hands, clenched fists. But I vowed, my emotions would fuel strategy, not chaos. Late that night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I let myself break down. I cried for the mother I'd lost. For the father who was too weak to protect my memory. For the childhood home that no longer felt like mine. I cried for the little girl in those hidden photographs, who'd never imagined she'd need to fight to be remembered in her own family. But after the tears came something else. Something cold and focused. Vivian thought she could rewrite history. Thought she could replace me with her own children in my father's legacy. She'd underestimated me. I pulled out my laptop and started making notes. Every instance of erasure I'd found. Every hidden photograph. Every missing memory. Created a timeline. When Vivian had married my father. When the changes started happening. When photos began disappearing. When my name stopped appearing in family stories. The pattern was clear. Systematic. Deliberate. This wasn't about making her children feel included. This was about making me disappear. I would prove it. Document it. Make it impossible to deny. And then I would restore the truth. I started cataloging every document she had altered or hidden. Her manipulations became a map for me. A blueprint of her arrogance, ready to be turned against her. I created a detailed spreadsheet. One column for what was missing. One column for where I'd found the original. One column for evidence of when it had been removed or altered. The missing graduation photo. Found in a box in the guest room closet. Removed approximately 2 years ago based on dust patterns. The altered family tree. Commissioned 6 months ago, according to the artist's signature in the corner. Original family documents showed my existence clearly. The rearranged photo shelves. I'd noticed changes over the past year, but hadn't realized the pattern until now. I documented everything with photographs, dated each discovery, created a narrative that was impossible to dispute. Vivian's pattern of erasure wasn't random. It had accelerated over the past 2 years, coinciding with my father's recent health scare. A mild heart attack that had made him more dependent on her, more willing to let her make decisions about the household. She was positioning herself and her children as his only family, erasing me so that when he passed, God forbid, I'd have no claim to his legacy. It was calculated, mercenary, brilliant in its cruelty. And now I had proof. I subtly referenced certain family records in conversation. Her flinch, a forced smile, gave me the first signs that she wasn't as untouchable as she thought. Vivian, I was looking through some old photos. Remember that Christmas when I was 12? We were having tea in the living room. Just the two of us. I'd requested this meeting, playing the role of dutiful stepdaughter. She barely looked up from her magazine. I wasn't here when you were 12, Clara. Right, of course. But Dad showed me the photos. That beautiful tree we had. You must have seen the pictures. Was barely noticeable. Perhaps. They're in the album in the guest room closet. The red leather one. Do you know which I mean? Her hand tightened around her teacup. I'm not familiar with every album in this house. Strange. I thought you'd reorganized all of them. You've done such a thorough job with the photos around the house. Her smile was forced. I've tried to make things more cohesive. Create a sense of family unity. Unity. Interesting word choice. She set down her cup sharply. Is there a point to this conversation? I smiled innocently. No point. Just chatting about family memories. Those are important, don't you think? The crack in her composure was small, but it was there. I found letters she had hidden from relatives. Letters proving that I had been deliberately erased from stories of holidays, achievements and milestones. Every word was a weapon. The box was in the back of Vivian's closet. I'd waited until she left for her weekly spa appointment to search her room. Inside were letters from my father's relatives. My aunts, my cousins, people who remembered me. One letter from my Aunt Florence was particularly revealing. I was confused by your Christmas card. You mentioned having 2 children, but what about Clara? Is she no longer part of the family? She was always such a bright girl. Please send my regards to her. Vivian had responded. The carbon copy was in the box. Clara has chosen to distance herself from the family. We respect her decision and focus on the children who want to be present. Lie. Complete fabrication. Another letter from my cousin. We'd love to see Clara at the reunion. Will she be attending? Vivian's response. Clara has other commitments and won't be joining us. I'd never been told about the reunion. Never given the chance to attend. She'd been systematically cutting me off from extended family, telling them I'd chosen to distance myself while simultaneously erasing me from our immediate family narrative. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. I planned every step, every revelation. She thrived on control, but I realized her power came from assumption. I was the overlooked piece she never anticipated fighting back. Vivian had made a critical error. She'd assumed I was passive, compliant, too polite to confront her directly. She'd assumed I'd accept being erased without a fight. I started planning my counterattack carefully. First, I needed allies. Family members who remembered me. Who could corroborate the truth when I revealed her deception. Second, I needed to preserve all evidence. Not just photographs, but dates, timelines, proof of her lies to relatives. Third, I needed the perfect moment. A gathering where her lies would be exposed publicly, where she couldn't spin the narrative or claim misunderstanding. The annual family dinner was in 2 months. Extended family would attend. Aunts, uncles, cousins who hadn't seen me in years, because Vivian had told them I'd chosen to stay away. That would be my moment. I had time to prepare. Time to gather more evidence. Time to coordinate with relatives she'd alienated from me. Vivian thrived on control. She maintained her power by controlling the narrative, the information, the family history. I was about to show her what happened when the overlooked piece started fighting back. I reached out to distant relatives who remembered the truth. Carefully, quietly, I began forming a network who could corroborate the original family history. I started with Aunt Florence, my mother's sister. Someone who'd known me since birth. Clara. Her voice on the phone was warm, surprised. Darling, I've missed you. Your stepmother said you'd been too busy to visit. Aunt Florence, that's not true. I never knew you wanted to see me. What do you mean? I explained carefully. The erased family tree. The hidden photographs. The letters claiming I'd distanced myself from the family. Her response was immediate and angry. That woman told me you didn't want contact with your mother's side of the family. That you were focused on your new stepfamily. I never said that. I've wanted to see you for years. We talked for an hour. She confirmed details I'd suspected. Vivian had been actively keeping us apart, claiming I was too busy, too distant, too focused on my career. Lies. What can I do to help? Aunt Florence asked. Come to the family dinner in 2 months. I'm going to need witnesses who remember the truth. I made similar calls to cousins, to my father's siblings, to family friends who'd known me growing up. The response was uniform. Shock at the lies, anger at the manipulation, and commitment to help. I presented subtle hints of proof in casual conversation with family. A raised eyebrow, a pause. Her control began to waver. I stayed calm, letting her panic remain invisible. At a small family gathering, I mentioned my mother casually. Mom used to make the best apple pie. Remember, Dad? My father nodded. She did. You inherited her baking skills. Vivian's face tightened almost imperceptibly. I found her recipe book in the attic, I continued. Such beautiful handwriting. All those notes about family traditions. The attic. Vivian's voice was sharp. What were you doing up there? Looking for old memories. There's so much family history stored away. One of Vivian's daughters, Simone, asked innocently. What kind of history? Photo albums, letters, birth certificates, all sorts of documents about our family's past. Vivian stood abruptly. Those are just old papers. Nothing interesting. On the contrary, they're fascinating. Aunt Florence wants to see them when she visits. Florence is visiting. The panic in Vivian's voice was barely concealed. Yes, she'll be at the family dinner. She's so excited to reconnect. It's been too long since we've seen each other. I watched Vivian's control waver. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected me to reconnect with family she'd worked so hard to separate me from. The subtle shift in power was delicious. I remembered birthdays she erased, holidays she rewrote, and personal achievements she downplayed. Each memory sharpened my resolve to reclaim my story. I was 15 when I won the state science fair. My project on environmental conservation had been chosen from hundreds of entries. My mother would have been so proud. My father had been proud. We'd celebrated at my favorite restaurant. In the current family narrative, that achievement didn't exist. I was 18 when I graduated high school with honors. Valedictorian. Full scholarship to college. Vivian had attended the ceremony reluctantly. Made snide comments about my speech being too long, and my dress being inappropriate. Now, there was no record in our house of my academic success. I was 21 when I completed my undergraduate degree. My father had come to the ceremony alone. Vivian claimed to be ill, though I later saw photos of her at a spa retreat that same weekend. My graduation photo had been prominently displayed in the study, until Vivian replaced it with her daughter's high school diploma. Each erased memory fueled my determination. These weren't just photographs or mentions on a family tree. These were moments of my life. Achievements I'd earned. Memories that defined who I was. Vivian wanted to erase me from family history. I would make sure everyone remembered. At a casual family gathering, I mentioned details she had tried to suppress. Her forced reactions were telling. Her lies started to crack under scrutiny. Dad, remember when I was 8 and we went to the beach? That summer right after Mom passed away. We were at dinner with several relatives. Vivian stiffened. Of course, my father said. You built that enormous sandcastle. Won the contest. Smiled. I found the photo. The one where I'm holding the trophy. You look so proud. Vivian interjected quickly. That was such a long time ago. Does anyone want more wine? But my cousin spoke up. I remember that trip. And Catherine took that photo. She showed it to everyone for months. Another relative chimed in. Clara was always winning things as a child. So competitive. Still am, I said pleasantly. I don't like losing what's mine. My eyes met Vivian's. She understood the message. The dinner conversation shifted, but the damage was done. Relatives were remembering me, remembering my history with the family. Vivian's carefully constructed narrative of her children being my father's only legacy was crumbling. She excused herself early, claiming a headache. I stayed, chatting with relatives, sharing memories, making sure they remembered I existed. Making sure they'd remember when I revealed the full truth. I uncovered a forgotten ledger she never touched. An unaltered account of family history, with my name clearly included. The ultimate proof that she had rewritten reality. In my grandfather's old desk, stored in the basement, I found the family Bible. This was an heirloom passed down through generations. A leather-bound book where births, marriages, and deaths were recorded in careful handwriting dating back over a century. My name was there. Clara Margaret Whitman. Born to Catherine and Andrew Whitman. My mother's death was recorded. My father's second marriage to Vivian was noted. But this record couldn't be altered without destroying a family treasure that predated Vivian by decades. It was irrefutable proof of my place in family history. I also found my grandfather's journal. He died 2 years before Vivian entered our lives. His entries mentioned me frequently. Clara is walking now. Andrew is so proud. Clara's 5th birthday. Such a bright child. Clara graduated today. Catherine would have been so proud of the woman she's becoming. These documents existed outside Vivian's control. They told the original version of our family's story. The truth she'd tried to rewrite. I photographed every page. Preserved every mention of my name. Documented the unbroken chain of family history that included me. This was my trump card. I didn't confront her directly. I let the evidence accumulate, letting others unknowingly witness the inconsistencies in her story. Every slip she made strengthened my position. Vivian started making mistakes. Small ones at first. At a family brunch, she mentioned our 2 children, in front of relatives who knew I existed. Someone corrected her. Don't you mean 3 children? She'd fumbled. Of course, I meant my 2 and Andrew's daughter. The distinction was telling. My 2. Andrew's daughter. Not our family. Another time, she'd referred to family traditions we started, that predated her marriage to my father by years. Traditions my mother had established. Traditions I remembered. Relatives noticed. Raised eyebrows. Confused looks. I didn't correct her. I let the inconsistencies pile up. Let people start questioning her version of events on their own. The more she tried to control the narrative, the more obvious the gaps became. Cousin asked about my mother's favorite Christmas cookies. Vivian claimed not to know the recipe. I offered to share it from my mother's original cookbook, the one I'd found in the attic. Vivian had claimed that cookbook didn't exist. Each contradiction weakened her position. Each slip revealed the extent of her manipulation. I stayed quiet, patient, collecting evidence while her credibility eroded. I invited family members to review old albums and letters, for nostalgia. Their reactions of surprise and recognition quietly undermined her authority. Aunt Florence, would you like to see Mom's old photo albums? I found them in the attic. We sat in the living room, Vivian hovering nearby, clearly uncomfortable. Aunt Florence flipped through the pages, her eyes filling with tears. Oh, your mother was so beautiful. And look at you as a baby. She pointed to photos. Named the people in them. Described the events captured. Other relatives gathered around. I remember this. Look how young we all were. Clara, you look so much like your mother. Each comment was a reminder that I existed. that I had history with this family, that I couldn't be erased. Vivian tried to redirect attention. That's ancient history. We should focus on creating new memories. But Aunt Florence wasn't having it. Family history matters. These memories are precious. Clara, you should keep these albums safe. I intend to, I said, looking directly at Vivian. I'm making sure nothing important gets lost or forgotten. The message was clear. Vivian excused herself again, her composure cracking. The relatives who'd seen the albums started asking questions. Why weren't these photos displayed? Why hadn't they seen them before? I let them draw their own conclusions. She tried to intimidate me with a private conversation, claiming she controlled the narrative. I stayed calm, smiling, and let her overconfidence work against her. Vivian cornered me in my room one evening. We need to talk about what you're doing. I looked up from my laptop innocently. What am I doing? You're causing problems, stirring up old memories, making people uncomfortable. I'm sharing family history. How is that causing problems? You're trying to undermine me, turn people against me. Smiled. Vivian, I'm not doing anything except being honest about my family's past. If that threatens you, perhaps you should ask yourself why. Her face flushed. I control this household. Your father supports me completely. Does he? Have you shown him the family tree without my name? The letters you wrote to relatives claiming I distanced myself. She stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with proximity. You have no proof of anything. Actually, I have quite a bit of proof. Documented. Dated. Irrefutable. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? We stared at each other. She blinked first. The family dinner is in 2 weeks, I said casually. It should be quite interesting, don't you think? She left without responding, her confidence visibly shaken. Her overconfidence had been her weakness. She'd never considered that I might fight back. I discovered she had secretly altered legal documents to officially rewrite family records. I quietly documented everything, now ready for a decisive reveal. In my father's filing cabinet, I found something that made my blood run cold. Vivian had created a new will for my father, one that left everything to her and her children. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere in the document. It wasn't signed. My father hadn't approved it yet, but it was clearly being prepared for his signature. I photographed every page. I also found a modified trust document. Again, my name had been removed. Assets were being redirected to Vivian's children exclusively. This wasn't just about family photographs and symbolic erasure anymore. This was about systematically removing me from my father's legal legacy. If he signed these documents, if he had another health scare and Vivian convinced him in a vulnerable moment, I would be left with nothing. Not just erased from family history, but completely disinherited. I made copies of everything. The original will that included me. The new documents that excluded me. Every alteration, every change, meticulously documented. This was beyond manipulation. This was fraud. Potential elder abuse if she was pressuring my father while he was vulnerable. The full scope of her plan was now clear. And I had proof of everything. I subtly coordinated with relatives, historians, and long-trusted family friends. Their verification of the original records created a network ready to confirm the truth. I reached out to my father's longtime attorney, the one who'd handled his affairs before Vivian entered the picture. Mr. Patterson, I need to discuss some concerns about my father's legal documents. I met him at his office, bringing copies of everything I'd found. His face grew increasingly stern as he reviewed the materials. These modifications were done without proper legal counsel, he said finally. I didn't prepare these documents. Your father's actual will, the valid one, is in my office and includes you as a primary beneficiary. Vivian is trying to change that. It appears so. But these documents aren't legally binding. They'd never hold up in court, especially given the suspicious circumstances. He agreed to attend the family dinner. to be present as a witness, to verify which documents were legitimate if questions arose. I also contacted a family historian, someone my grandfather had worked with years ago to document our family lineage. She had records going back generations. Comprehensive documentation that included me prominently. This family tree you described, the one excluding you, it's historically inaccurate, she confirmed. I have the legitimate family records if needed. She would attend the dinner too. My network was forming. Witnesses who could verify truth from manipulation. I invited her to a family discussion, under the guise of curiosity. Calmly, I guided the conversation toward her inconsistencies, forcing her to stumble under the weight of her own lies. Vivian, I'd like to understand something. For the family dinner next week. We sat in the living room. Made tea. Kept my tone friendly, curious. What do you want to understand? The family tree in Dad's study. Can you explain how it was researched? She shifted uncomfortably. The artist used information I provided. From what sources? Family records. Which records specifically? Because I've been looking through our archives, and the information doesn't match. I don't remember every detail. Did you consult the family Bible? Grandfather's journals? The official documents in Dad's filing cabinet? Each question made her more defensive. This is ridiculous. Why does it matter? Because family members are asking questions. And Florence noticed discrepancies. Mr. Patterson has concerns about legal documents. The family historian is confused by the inaccuracies. Her face went pale. What have you done? I've simply verified facts. Isn't accuracy important when documenting family history? You're trying to sabotage me. I'm trying to preserve truth. There's a difference. She stood abruptly. Your father will hear about this harassment. Please tell him. I'd welcome that conversation. She left, her composure completely shattered. The trap was set. Her confidence faltered as others noticed discrepancies she hadn't accounted for. She panicked internally, though she tried to maintain a composed facade. At dinner that evening, my father mentioned he'd spoken with Vivian. She's quite upset with you, Clara. Because I asked about the family tree. She says you've been spreading lies, trying to turn people against her. Dad, I've only been sharing documented family history. Photos from the attic. Letters from relatives. Records that prove I'm part of this family. He looked uncomfortable. Of course you're part of this family. Then why isn't my name on the family tree? Why have photos of me been hidden? Why has Vivian told relatives I chose to distance myself when that's not true? I'm sure there's an explanation. There is. She's been systematically erasing me from our family narrative. I have proof. I showed him the letters, the hidden photos, the timeline of changes. His face went from confusion to shock to something like guilt. I didn't realize. I thought she was just redecorating. It's more than redecorating, Dad. Look at this. I showed him the modified will. The trust documents with my name removed. This is. I never agreed to this. I know. But she was preparing them for your signature. He sat down heavily. For the first time he saw the full scope of what had been happening. I presented the hidden records to the family. Letters, albums, journals, legal documents. Every lie she told unraveled in real time. Shock, disbelief, and awe rippled through the room. Her arrogance had blinded her. The family dinner was attended by 30 people. Extended family, close friends, my father's attorney, the family historian. After the meal I stood. I'd like to share some family history I recently discovered. I set up a presentation. Photos projected on the wall. Documents displayed on the table. This is the family tree currently hanging in Dad's study. You'll notice something missing. Murmurs spread through the room. This is the family Bible, recording births and deaths for 5 generations. You'll see my name here. I showed page after page. My birth certificate. My grandfather's journal entries. Photos from throughout my childhood. These letters show how relatives were told I'd chosen to distance myself. That wasn't true. I was actively prevented from maintaining those relationships. Aunt Florence confirmed. Others nodded. These are legal documents being prepared without proper counsel, removing me from my father's will and trust. Mr. Patterson verified their illegitimacy. Finally, I showed the timeline. When each photo was hidden. When each document was altered. When each lie was told. The pattern was undeniable. Vivian sat frozen, unable to defend herself against the documented truth. My father looked devastated. Her own children looked confused and uncomfortable. The truth was out. She tried to spin excuses, but credibility was gone. My name, my history, and my rightful place were fully restored. I didn't yell, I didn't shame her. I simply showed the truth, letting reality speak for itself. Vivian attempted to explain. This is all a misunderstanding. I was trying to help Clara move on from the past. Aunt Florence interrupted. By lying to me. Telling me she didn't want contact. I never meant. By hiding her childhood photos. Another relative asked. I was redecorating. By removing her from legal documents. Mr. Patterson's voice was stern. Vivian had no credible response. Each excuse contradicted the documented evidence. My father stood. Vivian, I think you should go upstairs. We need to discuss this family matter. She looked around the room, seeking support. Found none. She left, her authority completely destroyed. The family turned to me. I don't want revenge, I said quietly. I just want my history preserved. My name restored to where it belongs. My place in this family recognized. My father approached me, tears in his eyes. Clara, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. You see it now. That's what matters. The family historian presented the corrected family tree. One that included me properly. One that told the truth. It would replace the fraud hanging in the study. Justice was served through truth, not through anger. I walked away stronger, recognized, and empowered. My story, my history, my identity, untouched by her manipulation. Poetic justice complete. I had reclaimed my past, my family, and my worth. 3 months later, the house looked different. Photos of me throughout my childhood were displayed prominently. The correct family tree hung in the study. My achievements were acknowledged. Vivian had moved out. The marriage ended quietly. My father was working with Mr. Patterson to ensure his legal documents accurately reflected his wishes. My relationship with extended family was restored. Aunt Florence visited monthly. Cousins I hadn't seen in years were back in my life. The family Bible was displayed in a place of honor, a reminder that truth couldn't be rewritten, only temporarily hidden. I'd learned important lessons. That silence enables erasure. That documentation preserves truth. That family history matters because it defines who we are. Vivian had tried to erase me systematically, carefully, permanently. But you can't erase someone who refuses to be forgotten. I'd fought back not with anger, but with evidence. Not with confrontation, but with patience. Not with emotion, but with irrefutable proof. She'd rewritten family history to exclude me. The hidden records told the original version. And the truth had restored everything she'd tried to take. I was Clara Whitman, daughter, granddaughter, heir to a family legacy that no one could erase. My name was back where it belonged. And it would never be forgotten again.